assess is the visible security elements that I can see. And these things tell me specifically what, from experiences, from observation, all that stuff actually defines what your culture looks like. So the things that we have underneath, and guess which one is the hardest to change of all these three levels? The assumptions, correct. They're the most difficult to change. So when I'm saying culture is basically how things are done around. Culture is basically how things are done around here. Someone described that. It's how things are done. So when I walk in, I'll see, as I mentioned, the dress code, the language, how you guys interact with each other. Before I even look at your policies, before I look at your strategies, I already have a feel of what your cybersecurity culture looks like. And so it is the values. You know, we have stuff like values, we have beliefs, we have all these things that are in the organization that either came into the organization from the outside or have been built within the organization. So culture is looked at in two different ways. The first one, culture is looked at as a variable, something which can be used in the organization to shape outcome. And managers like this one. Why? Managers like using culture as something that they can take, they can shape, and then it produces output of how the organization looks, which is correct. That is one aspect of culture. So culture can be seen as something that can be used, something of utility to the organization. The other perspective of culture is what the organization is. So the first one is what the organization can use. The second one is what the organization is. Which one do you think is the correct one? I can hear is. Okay? So it's is. It's actually both. So culture tells me what your organization is. At the same time, culture tells me how attributes of culture have been used within your organization to produce what your organization is today. So you get the opportunity of being the first people to actually get a summary of what my PhD dissertation was on. This is what I did. I did the impact of organizational culture on cybersecurity culture. And the biggest issue that I discovered was the leadership. The leadership will tell us what sort of culture we have in the organization. Now, the question I have for you is, how do we build culture then? Or where does it come from? Because I know when we talk about it, it looks like a really small thing. But culture is the biggest thing to change in an organization, and it's what impacts on your security posture the most. Because you'll bring in technology, but if we don't have a culture to follow policy, what happens? If we don't have a culture to follow the rules of configuration, what happens? If we don't have a culture to use AI effectively and ethically, what happens? So culture remains the biggest underlying factor that is hindering your security posture to be where it's supposed to be. And this is a conversation that we need to have at board level, because culture is not a HR. We were having a discussion. Culture is not a HR thing. Culture is a corporate-wide thing, because the highest person in your organization, the board, if I observe them, I will know what your culture looks like. And the juniors in your organization, when I observe them, I will know what your security culture looks like. And so it's a corporate-wide issue that we need to discuss. So when it comes to information security, then you can see the definition that I have there is actually that it is the behavior directed by management. And that's why I said that culture is an affair, and it's a reflection of what your organizational leadership looks like. So it is directed by management and influenced by policy. And it becomes part of the way things are done in the organization. and it becomes visible. That's what we have talked about. We just said it becomes visible. Now, this is my last slide, by the way. I do anchor slides. So now, this one. So how do you know? What are the factors that are negatively impacting on your cybersecurity culture? We can see them here. So we have organizational bureaucracy. Sometimes we want to implement some stuff, but the way the organization is run prevents these things from being implemented in an efficient and effective way. We have isolation. This one is a big one. So I did a qualitative study, and so I got to talk to people. I got to talk to CISOs. I got to talk to all C-suite leaders across organizations. And this is what they told me. This is actually from the leaders in this country, in Kenya. My study was specific to Kenya. So the biggest thing that I found was, from both the leaders and from the employees, was isolation and segregation. Employees felt that cybersecurity is kind of like looked at in a cocoon, in isolation, and they are not included. Now, let me ask you, when there is a breach or when there's an attack, we need all heads working together. And yet we have isolated these people. So how do we effectively mitigate and make corrective action on the issues that have been brought about by our cultures in our organizations, if we are not inclusive? Because we need to be inclusive. Another big thing is inconsistent practices. This one I see a lot when I'm doing audits and when I'm doing security audits and assessments. I see a lot of inconsistencies. So today, you're doing this. One department is doing this, operating in silos. We operate in silos a lot. Right now, I'm consulting for an organization that has over 33,000 employees globally. So one of the things that we are trying to fix is this here, inconsistent practices. And now for an organization of that multitude, it is a problem. And oftentimes we assume that for SMEs it's better. No. I'll tell you today, for SMEs it's not better simply because we do not have firm practices that are actually this is what is followed. So we have the same challenges across small organizations and big organizations. How do we have consistency, or how do we build consistency in our practices? Then we still have a reactive security approach. Let me tell you something. Some people say, we have put in place IDRs, we have all this stuff, we have, But if you really analyze the organization, you'll see that cybersecurity is still handled in a very reactive way. And the reason I'm saying this, we'll go back to culture. If your culture is not fixed, you're still being reactive. If you have not touched on your values, if your values and your beliefs and the assumptions are not what are driving the response in your organization, you are still being reactive. And that's why we still have problems. So we have an incident, we have personal information, we have PII in the organization. We'll respond when there's an incident, but the whole thought structure that we have to protect this information from the beginning does not cut across the whole organization, right? Oh, sorry. So I lost my... Anyway, so I have 3 minutes left. So we have a lot of issues in the organization that are impacting on our security culture and security profiles that we need to fix. So inconsistent practices was one of the biggest ones that I had actually seen, okay? And then there are several other things that we can look at. There are things like we don't have, like we are not communicating, We are not communicating with each other. I've already spoken about that. I've already spoken about isolation. I've already spoken about a reactive approach. The other thing is oversight. So I'm talking to CISOs here and managers. How do we manage or how do we govern information security in the organization? There's a reason I asked the first question I asked. Do we have an information security strategy? And then I asked, do we have an IT strategy? And the reason I like asking that question, I think Harry is tired of hearing that question I ask it for a reason because the audiences are different. I'll put it this way. What runs your organization? Question. I have 2 minutes. What runs your organization? Question. Going once. Huh? Technology. Okay, he says technology. Do we agree? Technology runs the organization? Culture runs the organization? Someone else? Okay, let me ask you. Every single organization that you know runs on something. Regardless. When you go to a bank, they run on something. When you go to a hospital, they run on something. Okay, I'll tell you. Every single organization that you know runs on your personal information or information, some sort of sensitive information, right? So every organization runs on information. Now, technology, you said, runs the organization. I don't agree. Technology is just an enabler. Your technology enables your information to be managed efficiently. But information runs your organization. That's why we have manual processes. When technology fails, we revert to the manual processes because we still have the information. So if our information is not accurate or not adequately protected, then it affects everything else in the organization that you have in your organization. It will tell me the type of technology that you have in your organization. It will tell me how you interact with each other. And that's why today I said my topic will be culture under fire. Let's actually stop and think and discuss what is hindering our security profiles from being what they are supposed to be in our organizations. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Asante sana.
I didn't even use it. Okay.
Dr. Priel came for the jugular, right? Like literally, she came for the man, the woman in the mirror. So who did you see? Did you see yourself? Like, you know, it's oftentimes said that you can't BS yourself. Like, you can't tell yourself a lie. There is security by obscurity. You could obtain all the certifications that you think will secure you business, but if you're truly not implementing those things, then it is all for naught. So have you seen yourself? Have you seen your organization? And it's interesting that we've been talking a lot about tools. You know, a tool to do this, a tool to do that, but now we are talking about people. And Dr. Priel has just gotten us started on that conversation of people. And our next speaker will also kind of like build on that. And he is a cyber psychology researcher and human factors incident response trainer who specializes in stress-proofing financial and critical service in critical infrastructure teams and serving as a global ambassador of the Global Council for Responsible AI and a member of the Cognitive Security Institute and the Center for Neurotechnology and Law. How does that dotted line to people? I'm also curious, so help me welcome on stage Victor Wanyama, Head of Training from IPOM Africa, speaking to us about the missing domain in cybersecurity. Karibu.
So let me start by what happened at 11 p.m. at the SOC Operations Center. It's 11:07, the alert fires, the tool works, detection is clean. The analyst on duty has been awake for 14 hours. The SOC lead is unreachable. Someone acts, wrong assumption, evidence trail is lost. The attacker was inside for 40 minutes before anyone moved. Every domain did its job. But what failed? Before we get the answer to this, we need to see, as an industry, what are we defending currently? We have, on a wholesale, around 12 domains where we put all our budget, where our technology hub is found. There's nothing wrong with this. We all have certificates. I also have them. I like them. But these domains contain a fundamental flaw when they were created. They were assuming something, that the human being is always sharp, calm, and collected in every single incident that happens. The gap here, we are talking about things like analyst paralysis, cognitive overload, coordination failure, and confirmation bias, and stress in general. So here is what I'm talking about, the human performance security that we need to inculcate as leaders into our organizations. If we look at industry reports, the numbers are clear. This is not a Silicon Valley issue. This is a Johannesburg problem. This is a Nairobi problem. We need to move cybersecurity and how we define it as an industry from HR to engineering, because that is where it belongs. Our incident response processes are heavily factored by the numbers that are seen here. So if you go back to your building, this is what it really looks like to you. If you look at things like alert overwhelm for analysts, as an industry, we have a behavior of saying fatigue and burnout is a badge of honor. We need to move away from that. If you look at the Splunk 2025 report, it's quite alarming. 52% of analysts want to quit. They're so tired. And the other 52%, they want to leave the industry as a whole. So there is a big problem. We say there's a skills gap, but there are people who actively are looking to get out. If we talk about coordination, we usually have 3 people doing the right thing, but who's accountable? Do we have systems to mitigate against such things? If we look at the authority freeze, as leaders, what do your authority infrastructure tell us? The one that you found and the one that you created. Is it pushing people away? That the junior analysts cannot get to you? Because the interesting thing about authority is because you have been here, you have gone through the war stories, you have seen a lot of incidences. And the funny thing about a novel breach, a young analyst has a better ability to get to it much faster because he has less bias. He has less bias. And if you look at this, there are many other types of biases that happen when the stress hits during an incident response. Because if you look at the tabletops that we do, they're in this environment, a very nice, calm environment. But there's no incident that happens like this. It's never this nice. It's never this calm. So it's about inculcating the same thinking, the same pressure before we hit incidences. So here, as we sit here, our ADRs, our SIMs are firing, our files are doing great. But 8 months is the dwell time in the industry. We don't know what to say about AI when it comes. Now, as Rex said, yes, according to the Unit 42 research, it was saying that it now takes 72 minutes to exfiltrate data. And you can see the global cost and the cost in the global south. Now, here, for the human performance security, we are proposing a shift to the right. This is what we do traditionally on the left. We are proposing that we move the human performance so that we can treat security as the security of a human being as a variable. Instead of asking, why did James click the phishing link? The real questions are, what is it in our environment that made it possible for James to click? So this is the blameless reporting after incidents we are talking about here. We need to understand the cognitive and the physical pressures that our teams are facing as a tactical approach. This is not wellness, as I said, that belongs to HR. This is what people in military, medicine, nuclear operations have been using for decades. But cybersecurity that has a lot of impact can be extremely harmful if a breach does occur. We completely ignore this section. We are very much focused on our 12 domains. They're working well, they're doing good, but we assume that I, as an analyst, will stay the same no matter what. So this is the domain that we are not talking about. And it governs a various amount of things like stress physiology, cognitive overload, team coordination, attention management, and recovery protocols. At EPOM Africa, we have built the methodology to defend against this. So if we zoom in and come back to our African place, yes, of course, we have a thin bench, not to take a hit at the industry. If we look at the threat landscape, it's not geography specific. We are being hit at the same amount of attacks as the first world countries, and we're operating at half the army. If we look at cybercrime, it's also no lie that organized criminals are putting down the guns and they're picking up the keyboards. They have well-running companies, just like yours, with a HR, with team building, and they are ready for the industry. What happens after the incident response? Do we take it as a Monday morning, come back to work? We need to start thinking about the residual effects of what we were saying and what was not said being carried over to the next incident that happens in your environment. So yes, no domain owns this gap. So here's what we're proposing. We need to have tactical preparations before the incident. When the incident does occur, there will be specific protocols put in place to help the team and the leaders to communicate, to manage their stresses, to understand their biases that are related to incident response. And after, we'll have better, blameless after incident response, because remember, how you finish your current incident becomes the beginning of your next incident. So yes, we have built the methodology, and the attacker do not attack you from the firewall if your team freezes, where it will help us as security leaders to broaden our thinking and broaden our scope to understand what is happening to myself as the leader, as I'm speaking. The way I behave, is it for you to really understand from the human aspect how to understand what is going on in the war room and what is going on in the boardroom and how to communicate far much better. And this is the 2 days for the technical teams. They go in much deeper. Nothing about firewalls, nothing about ports. It's every single thing about a human being. from simple things. A simple tweet from a citizen journalist can end a company as we speak today. So these are the things we're talking about here. So if this is a gap that you feel you can see in your company, you can reach out to us. You can reach out to our sales director here, Brian, here. And if it hits you on Monday, you can always reach out to the CISO team. I want to give you a Navy SEAL statement that has been there for a very long time. We are talking about when a crisis hits, you rarely rise to the occasion. You usually sink to the level of your training. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is the missing domain: human performance security. Thank you. Can I take questions?
Thank you, Victor. Do you have any questions for him? And I thought that was very excellently delivered in the sense that, like we said, I like the analogy of the Navy SEAL. Like, we never think about it that way. You're a guy who's incident response, you're behind a computer, you're in the NOC, you're there looking after stuff, but no one told you how to operate under pressure. Salespeople always have a process. You're told, go to a customer, if they say no, ask this question, do this, do that, but are we doing that for our first-line responders? Do you have any questions for him and the team at EPOM? There is one question at the back.
Yeah, hello. Lovely presentation, thank you. My question is around what your perspectives are as people start to embed AI into some of the elements that you're discussing. So as AI is being brought in, for example, into a SOC to sort of help with some of the work, have you seen an impact in the human domain, and what advice can you give? Thanks.
Yes, for sure, the load is going down, but not every organization has adopted AI very quickly. So it is still a fundamental problem globally, actually not even in Africa. So it is really putting these things in place. Either way, even if you have AI, it still has human oversight. And there is when the human being comes through. Your stress responses, your cognitive biases, things like normalcy biases, meaning as an experienced leader, you have seen this pattern for so long, and you can easily dismiss a junior analyst because they're seeing the same pattern, but it is disguised. Yeah. Any more?
Any other questions? With no other questions, I'll say thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for shedding light on, I think, what remains still one of the largest gaps, the human element. Get this tool, get that other tool, get this other cloud thing going, but what about the people? And to close out our 2 days here together, we have a roundtable discussion, even as the team brings the seats on stage kindly. And we're looking at third and fourth parties. When we're looking at third and fourth parties, we are still again looking at how do we secure the ecosystem. And this last panel shall be moderated by none other than the unmistakable Carol Odero, Head of Content Africa, CIO by DX5. Karibu.
Thank you, Mbugua. I'm glad that there are all of you in the room. I think I'll avoid sitting here because for this session, I'm not going to play moderator. I'll be the bridge between them and you. So my panelists, please come to the stage. Mercy, Laban, Agre, and Emmanuel. I have to confess, we had a vendor for this session, but he couldn't make it. I think he probably realized we would be overwhelmed with CISOs. So are there any vendors in the room? be brave, it's okay. We won't bounce. Any vendors, or they're all outside, you're a vendor. Okay, we are going to be calling on you because we would like your input. So I will let my panelists introduce themselves. Just tell us who they are, what they do. They are all CISOs. This is an East African conversation because you have Uganda and Kenya. And thank you for coming. So please go ahead, Emmanuel.
Good afternoon. Emmanuel Kasula is my name. I serve at Stanbic Bank Uganda, the manager in charge of cybersecurity.
Thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Agre Nkuyahaga. I work with Housing Finance Bank Uganda as the CISO. My core responsibility is to protect, to enable, and to assure the success of the bank in terms of delivering services to our customers. And I'm happy to be here and engaging with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Masio Molo. I serve as the Director, Information Technology and Digital Transformation for Isuzu East Africa. We're an assembly and manufacturing company that produces the Isuzu cars. I lead the technology operations, and I'm not a CISO, but yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Good evening. My name is Laban Nyarera. I'm the CISO for Family Bank, where I lead the cybersecurity team. Thank you.
The cybersecurity thing. Okay, so we all know first, second parties. We know the third parties. The third parties are the vendors. Do we know the fourth parties are? So you know how you have a doctor. Do you ever think of your doctor's doctor? Your doctor's doctor also needs a doctor. Now, the fourth parties here are the subcontractors. They come with the vendor. So you bring in a vendor, he walks through the door, he comes into your business. But your vendor comes with a friend. Do you know the risks that this friend brings? Are you ready for them? Can you see them? Are you prepared for them? That's the conversation we are about to have. When your security depends on something you can't see, someone you can't control, something you're not necessarily able to manage. So I'll start with this question for all of us. Are there things that we should never, ever, ever outsource, no matter what they are in a business, and we should always keep them close? Anybody? Are there things we must never outsource, or we can outsource anything? The business will still go on. Can you think of something we should never give a vendor? So we can give the vendor anything, everything. They can take the most sensitive aspects of the business, and it's all good. Is there anything we can not outsource to a vendor?
To answer that, I guess it's a factor of risk within the organization. If management can sit and evaluate the risk posture of business processes and look at the aspect of what does it mean to outsource to a vendor a particular process, if management reaches a conclusion that yes, this is a viable alternative, and I think if at that level it's agreeable, then this can happen. But I believe that it's a factor of business managing risk prudently.
The vendor who put his hand up in the corner. Right, what's your name? I'll just give him a mic. Do you have a mic? Oh, it's all the way over here. So the question is there anything that you think should not be outsourced to you as a vendor? Are there parts of the business we are better off keeping to ourselves without bringing you on board?
Yes, there are. There are some sort of data based on the level of data access that the vendor is going to have, that we have to select the vendors, or instead of outsourcing that part of business to the vendor, you can collaborate with the vendor's in-house support system. Because if you look at it from an NDA perspective, we do have levels of NDA engagements. So there are some data that, yes, you cannot trust a vendor to actually handle unless they are part of your in-house systems, or they are part of your employee, or they are subcontract. So you have to understand the levels of data movement and control.
Okay, great, thanks. Mercy, let me just come to you. How many organizations do you think enforce cybersecurity before they bring in the vendor? Or should you wait until you bring them in and then onboard them and then action it once they are part of the system? At which part do you vet the vendor?
Okay, I'll give the political, and that involves the whole third-party risk management conversation and management of how cybersecurity or third-party security risk now fits into your vendor management. But more often than not, IT comes in, many organizations, what happens is you'll find the rest of the functions or the rest of the divisions go in and try to get some solutions, and then we are brought in towards the tail end sometimes, unfortunately. And by that time, there are some things that have been overlooked in terms of infrastructure, in terms of security. So we are brought in at the tail end, but ideally we should be involved right from the get-go.
And I remember Maida Mwangi talking about platforms and how we rely so much on external platforms. Is it a challenge if the vendor is, say, big tech, if the vendor is bigger than you, and maybe they get to dictate the terms, they tell you, take it or leave it? What do you do if it's, I don't know, Microsoft, and they tell you, these are our terms. Can you take this or leave it? Do you negotiate? How do you negotiate with big tech? What do you bring to the table versus what they are offering?
I think for big tech, it's a different conversation, because more often than not, their terms dictate. So you can try negotiate and relinquish some control to them, or ask them to relinquish a bit of control, but most of the time, the examples that you've given, the Microsofts, you have to kind of like adapt to their terms. And so as an organization, you have to look at it from a risk perspective and determine what is my appetite to be able to relinquish that control. There are some things that, okay, I can assess and say it's okay for the big tech company to have, or we totally cannot do this, and let's pull back and look for probably a local vendor or a local solution that's adaptable to what we need.
Also, we have the option of a local vendor versus a big tech person, and then you can choose the local vendor because you can manage the risk.
Yes, but again, contextual, and based on the organization and the risk appetite of that organization. Yeah.
Okay, Laban, you manage quite, you take care of the money, which requires a lot of security. But do you worry more about the big tech vendors, or do you worry about the small ones who have access to all these little intricacies of the business?
Thank you. I think the answer is both. But to be honest, most people are inclined to worry about the big players, but the answer is you should worry about both. And the reason is this: you've just mentioned big tech. They also come with the advantages. They have a mature security program. They have controls. They have contractual obligations. So most of the time you'll find, despite the visibility of the event that will happen, so some of these guys are the ones that you find in terms of impact, then they end up causing more damage. So while the inclination is to look at the big players, if it's a big tech company, it will be a headline globally, it will be a headline nationally, but the real damage sometimes tend to come from the smaller players, or lack of a better word, the shadow third parties. And you find in organizations, we have some of these very small companies that they offer very specific products, and they do a very critical service. So they don't